Hi guys, welcome to an interesting video on Wild Rift. So today we're back, or I shouldn't say we're back, but we are here with our first ever episode of the meta recap. Now you would have noticed that for the past week or so I have not posted any gameplay videos, and the main reason for that is I've been working hard on this series, which is the meta recap. So originally I wanted to do just one mega video of the entire meta from patch 1.0 all the way to patch 2.3 now, but firstly I realized it'll be way too long, and also I think that breaking up into smaller episodes and having higher quality on each video is better, because it also takes really long to edit one of these videos, because I have to put in all the champions that have released on that patch, the pictures of them, and edit the video pretty heavily, and background music, so on so on. So I decided to split it up. Now there's two main reasons why I want to do this. I haven't seen anyone else do any meta recaps for not even this game but any other games, but there are two reasons. Firstly, for players who have been playing from the very beginning like me, there's a lot of nostalgia factors, like thinking about back in the day when I first started playing the game. The most meta bot lane was Ezreal and Blitzcrank, which we'll get into really soon. Or if not, for players who have just recently started playing the game, or start playing the game, you know, let's say in patch 1.1, or let's say 2.1, or any time that's not from the very beginning, you guys can see what has happened, or what was the meta in the past. So I will only cover from 1.0, because that's when the first open beta started. Before that, there was a patch 0.5 or whatnot, which I don't know because I have not played the game yet, and also that was in the closed alpha testing, so not many people really got to play that. So the main goal of the meta recap is actually to highlight what the meta champions are for that patch for each role. So this is mainly based on my own experience playing the patches, and also from literally researching for hours on all of the past patch notes, opening all the past patch notes and researching who was meta, what changes led them to be meta. So the main goal is to cover which were the meta champions, but I will also include other stuff like dates, significant changes to the games, champion releases, you know, and events that have released on that patch as well. And I will also include clips of the meta champions. Like, you guys are seeing a couple of clips now. These are not the meta champions, but this is just clips in the background while I am talking. So something that I want to point out at the very start of this series, because I'm gonna be referring to this intro for all the rest of the episodes in this series, because this is going to be the explanation for what the series is and isn't, so that there isn't really any confusion amongst everybody. So I'm only covering the meta, the most meta champions. So normally in each role 1 to 2 champions, sometimes 3, but there are going to be a lot of champions that are always staying in the meta, but they're not the meta defining champions. They're not the top at that role. Now there will be a period, there are going to be some periods of time where those champions that are always good does become the most meta and best champion for that role, just because some other champion got nerfed, or because there are no better options. So something that is always in the, it's something like it's always in the A tier kind of champion might actually show up. Now I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what kind of champions I'm referring to. So for example, the top lane has the most. There are champions that are always good but not necessarily the most meta, like Malphite, Akali, Fiora, Camille, and Darius. Now I'm going to use Darius as an example. So on the patch that Darius released that we will cover later, he did actually become the most meta, best top lane champion for that one patch, because no one knew how to play against him and he was wreaking havoc. But since that patch onwards, he's no longer ever the top Baron lane champion, but he has always been meta ever since he was released. He has always been like a viable, good top lane pick, just that he was never the most meta. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of more examples for the different roles. Take note that this list is not exhaustive. So there is the top laners that I mentioned. There is like Lee Sin and Wukong for the jungle. There's like Orianna and Corki for mid lane, Kai'Sa for AD carry, and Janna for support. These are some of the examples of champions that are always good but not the most meta champions, except for some periods of time where there are no other more meta champions than them. So now we have covered the basic intro and laid the groundwork for the rest of the series. Now with that out of the way, we're gonna actually jump into the actual first ever patch, which is patch 1.0. Alright, so here we have patch 1.0, which is the first public open beta released on October in 2020. So this was what the initial meta looked like, but before that, we did actually have our first ever event, which is the KDA event, which was also in conjunction with League PC. So this was of course still early days, so the meta was still developing, particularly for Baron lane and mid lane. The meta was not very strong. So in the Baron lane, originally on the very first patch, Vayne Baron lane was actually the meta. Now, if you guys don't know about this, Vayne is in a terrible spot right now, but originally on release, Vayne was one of the best, if not the best, Baron laners. She was really broken in the Baron lane. And some other good Baron laners that a lot of people like to play were Olaf and Gragas. So Baron lane meta not really defined, same for mid lane. Mid lane meta was not really defined, but most people gravitated towards Zed, so we saw a lot of Zed and also quite a bit of Orianna. But for the rest of the roles, the meta was actually pretty defined. So in the jungle, undisputedly the best jungler at the time was Xin Zhao. So not only was he very easy to play, but he also had really broken stats. He had very simple, easy ganks, and he was just dominating the meta. He could invade, he could do everything. And of course, Lee Sin was meta from the game's release and has always been meta. Lee Sin has pretty much almost never left the meta, except for a brief period where after a lot of nerfs, people thought that he wasn't that good anymore, but he has pretty much always been meta since the very start. So after Xin Zhao, we have Lee Sin, who is of course second up on the jungle meta. And now, here, as I alluded to earlier, in the Dragon lane and in the support roles, we actually have Ezreal and Blitzcrank. Now on release, Ezreal was completely broken, and this was before a lot of nerfs to Ezreal. Ezreal caught a ton of nerfs from when he was in this broken state up till now, which some of which have been reverted. We'll of course cover that later on in our patch history, but Ezreal at the very beginning was really strong. Like his Mystic Shot could like do about half HP of like squishies, and even on like tanky characters, he can do like 1/4 to 1/3 of their HP. Ezreal was completely broken, and he spiked like in the mid game, not even in the late game. Ezreal was a monster at the very beginning, and a lot of people realized it, and Ezreal was really strong. Now, I will say it. I did not indicate it on in the picture over here, but after Ezreal, the second best ADC at the time was Jhin. Yeah, so that is just something to take note. In support, it was just a one-man show. Blitzcrank was the best support. Now this was before the nerf to his hook width, so it was honestly not very difficult to hook with Blitzcrank because his hitbox was insane. So sometimes it appeared the hook wouldn't hit, but it still did, and it simply said Blitzcrank was just broken. And in the very original meta, Enchanter supports were in the trash because of Blitzcrank. So Blitzcrank could easily hook Janna, Soraka, Sona, Seraphine, or any other Enchanter support, and that support is instantly dead. Even if they flash, they sometimes die. So Blitzcrank was the meta support, just him alone. He was the best. So this is what the original Wild Rift meta looked like on release. Now, without further ado, this was the original meta. We're gonna move on to the next patch. Okay, so the next patch was patch 1.0a. It was actually honestly a very small patch, very little changes occurred. However, those changes did affect the meta tremendously. Now you will notice in the Dragon lane and the support lane there is completely no changes because none of the changes affected Ezreal or Blitzcrank. However, you will see that in the Baron lane, now there is a clearly defined meta where AP Gragas was the best. Now, in the current patch, which is patch 2.3, I'm recording this on patch 2.3, Gragas is back in the meta, and that was tank Gragas, but originally on the very early meta, when the top lane meta slash Baron lane meta got defined in patch 1.0a, AP Gragas was the meta. So Gragas did a lot of damage and had a very good sustain with his passive So Gragas could do it all. Gragas was the best Baron laner. Also, you will notice I've moved Orianna out of the so-called list because, as I mentioned in the intro, Orianna technically is always kind of meta, but just may not be the meta-defining character. So here, Gragas was the meta-defining character at this point in time. He was played in both Baron lane and mid lane, and also in the jungle, but he was best in Baron lane and then followed by mid lane. So mid lane also had a lot of Gragas play, especially since he was played AP at this point in time. So mid lane is the places for mages, so Gragas was also very meta in the mid lane. Zed was still up there. Zed was really popular and pretty strong, honestly, at the beginning of the game. Now in the jungle, here we have the first very big change that we have. So Lee Sin is left alone at the top of the mountain in the jungle. Why did that happen? So this was the patch that Xin Zhao got nerfed to the ground. And since then, Xin Zhao has never been really meta again. Now he did just get a mini rework, so we'll see what happens with that. But this is what happened. He got nerfs to his base HP, his base AD, his base armor, and his base MR. So all his base stats all got hit pretty hard. In addition to that, he got his E range nerfed and his ult cooldown nerfed as well. So he caught on a ton of nerfs and he was just nerfed to the ground. He was completely out of the meta, and from this point on he became a very low tier jungler. He was completely kicked out of the meta the hard way. And what else changed? In the Baron lane, Vayne, as you can see, is not there anymore. Why did it happen? Vayne caught a big nerf to her W, her silver boat's damage, which is the main part that made her good in the Baron lane, and to a higher extent in the AD carry role as well, just that Ezreal was way better than her. But in the Baron lane, she was really dominant in the beginning, but after getting the nerf to her W damage and her passive movement speed, which is two very big hits to Baron lane Vayne, because Baron lane Vayne relies on the opponent Baron laner being immobile, running them down with her passive, on her actual passive 900 and on her W Silverboot's passive for the true damage every third auto attack. So with these two big hits to Vayne, she is completely out of the meta for the Baron lane. And this is mainly what the meta looked like for patch 1.0a. Now we're gonna move on to patch 1.1. Okay, so for the last patch that we'll be covering for this video, it's patch 1.1. As you guys can already see, there's a lot of changes, but before we get into the meta changes for patch 1.1, we're going to cover some game changes. So first up, this patch was actually released in December of 2020. So there are two big major game changes. Now the first change is that cooldown reduction turned into ability haste. So this was the patch where that change carried over from the League of Legends PC, where cooldown reduction became ability haste, and now it is obviously still ability haste. So this was the patch that happened. And then we have the mana adjustments. So there was mana adjustments to basically every single character in the game. Now this is way too long to explain, but if you guys were playing this period, you would know what I'm talking about. If not, you can take a look at the patch notes for patch 1.1a. Sorry, not patch 1.1, not patch 1.1a, patch 1.1. But one of the most major changes for the mana adjustments is that Ezreal pretty much has got, if I'm not mistaken, got about half his mana cut. So he got about half his mana removed, so he had half mana pool and less mana growth per level, which is one of the reasons why Ezreal went out of the meta. So that was an indirect nerf to Ezreal, the mana adjustments. Then what else we had was the first couple of champion releases. So we have the release of the Noxian brothers, which is Darius, as well as Draven. So Draven was actually pretty good on release, but Jhin was the most meta marksman at this point in time, not Draven. And we also have the release of Wukong. So with these three champion releases, they did have an accompanying event as well, which is the Noxian Brothers event, where you could get one of the two brothers for free, and also the Wukong event, where you could get him for free by completing the missions. So with that out of the way, we're going to jump into the who are the meta champions. So firstly, we have Darius, who on release was the best new Baron laner. So nobody knew how to play against Darius. Everybody was just simply letting Darius stack on them and dunk on them, and Darius was a menace, especially during the patch that he was released. He still does the same thing now, but unreleased, no one really knew how to play against him, and even in high elo, Darius was dunking on the high elo players. So Darius was defining the meta for this patch. Now Gragas did catch some nerfs this patch. However, it was not enough to bring him out of the meta, at least as of yet. So Gragas is still in the meta for the top lane as well as the mid lane. Now, in the jungle, you guys can see the addition of Shyvana. Now, this was when Shyvana didn't actually particularly get any changes, but people just started to see Shyvana as a pretty good jungler. Now, it is unusual because Lee Sin is also meta at this point in time. So Lee Sin, you would think, has a very easy time invading the Shyvana, but in reality, actually Shyvana was still a good pick, and many people still took Shyvana, and Shyvana actually remained good for quite a long time. So Shyvana started to get into the meta, and Lee Sin and Shyvana became the best junglers. Mid lane had no changes, but in the ADC and the support roles, there were a ton of changes. So firstly, in addition to the Ezreal mana nerf, he also got a nerf to the attack speed on his passive. He also got a huge nerf to his Q damage, and also a huge nerf to the cooldown on his E, his arcane shift. So that was enough to boot Ezreal way out of the meta, and he dropped down from like S tier to like a B or C tier type of champion. And Jhin became the premier AD carry from this patch onwards. Now it is worth noting that on this patch, Jhin himself actually did get some nerfs as well, but his nerfs were actually to his early game attack speed and his early game attack speed growth, but in the late game it was the same. His E slow went, I think, from 45% to 30%, and also his ult cooldown did get an increase, but as we know, ult cooldown increases normally don't matter too much. The E slow was actually significant because previously the slow was so strong that sometimes the opponent did get caught in the exploding trap just because of how potent the slow is, and he did get a hit to his early game, but he was still the strongest AD carry. Now, part of the reason why this is the case is because at this point in time, Guardian Angel was the best AD carry item. Every AD carry was rushing GA as the first item. Jhin was rushing GA first item. Misfortune was rushing GA first item. Even Kai'Sa was rushing GA first item. This was the time where the bot lane meta was the GA meta. So the bot laners all rush GA. So Jhin was a very, very good first item GA champion. So he was the best AD carry. Also, his second item would be Youmuu's, and this is pre-nerf to the Youmuu's. So last time when you stacked up to 100 stacks, your next attack will apply on-hit magic damage. So this was pre-GA nerf and pre-Youmuu's nerf. So even though Jhin himself got nerfed, his core items were really strong at this point in time. So Jhin was the best ADC at this point in time. And in the support role, Blitzcrank got the nerf that pretty much put him out of the meta forever. Blitzcrank went from the best support sitting alone in the S tier to like basically a C tier support, essentially. So the nerf was to his hook width. He got a huge nerf to his hook width, which made it a lot harder to hit his hooks. And they have since then buffed Blitzcrank's like damage on his Q, his passive, cooldown, his E, his W. They have buffed him in so many ways, but this nerf killed him and has never ever gone back to the meta after this nerf. So Jhin has gone from the meta, and because of that, the three supports that were sort of good supports but not really great supports became sort of the meta supports, which is Alistar, Braum, and Janna. So Alistar, Braum, and Janna pretty much remain good all the way up to like current present day. Pretty much they are still good to some extent. So, but in this patch, the support meta was really shaken up. So you saw a lot of Alistar, a lot of Braum, and a lot of Janna. Mainly because Alistar was kind of the best support. Braum was a good matchup into Alistar, and Janna was a good matchup into both Braum and Alistar. So this was the three supports which were sort of meta at this point in time. So this was the state of Wild Rift's meta from patch 1.0 to 1.08 to patch 1.1. So this is all we'll be covering for this very first episode of the meta recap. If you guys like what you have seen, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And in the next Walriff meta recap, we're going to be covering patch 2.0 onwards. So thank you so much for watching the video, guys, and goodbye.